Anthony Accatatta, Shipfitter, second class. I always had an interest in the Navy and the Merchant Marine. I lived in Jersey City as a child, and that was a seafaring community. Most of the people that we knew, the friends of the family, were all either Merchant Marine people or Navy people. My brother was in the Navy for 7 years. He was in both the Second World War and Korea. And it was just a natural thing for me to go into the Navy or the Merchant Marine. I had tried to get into the Merchant Marine Academy and was not able to get in. So my next choice was the Navy, which was really my first love anyway. The Navy, to me, was something that was going to be real special. And that's why I had that interest. I had interest in the sea and the seafaring ways. And when I was 16 years old, I went to the Naval Reserve Center and asked them about joining, and I wound up that I actually signed I didn't sign all the paperwork. I filled out all the paperwork when I was 16 years old yet, and on my birthday I had permission from my father to join. I showed him that, and I signed up the first day I was 17. Still in high school at that time, and it was a reserve set up in Jersey City, and it was meetings once a week, and then 2 weeks in the summertime to do obligation, and then several times a year, probably every other month, we would go for a weekend over to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and it was a minesweeper there that we were assigned to. And that really got us into the actual work of what the Navy does. The first summer after I joined in May, and I went to boot camp. I believe it was end of June, starting July, and went to Great Lakes Naval Training Center in Illinois. And that was quite an experience. I mean, they break you down so they can build you up in the way they want you, and it was very, very hard. It was difficult. One of the things I remember that during the swim test, they wanted to see who could swim, who couldn't swim, and the folks that couldn't swim, there was maybe a half a dozen. They said, well, we're going to line you up on this platform that was about 15 feet above the water, and they said, we're just going to see, let you see what it's going to look like when you're on the side of the ship and you have to abandon ship. And as they're talking to these half a dozen guys, a guy comes with a pole behind them and pushes them all in the water. And as it was, half of them could swim right away. So it was kind of a neat way. They knew what they were doing, and for the folks that couldn't swim, there were people there with rescue poles to pull them out. And then because my name began with A, I had to go 2 more times. Everyone had to go up, jump off the platform, and tread water and swim a certain distance. Because I was at the top of the list, I had to go back up and demonstrate it with a life jacket on. And so I got good training there. And we did firefighting, we did the basic seamanship and that type of a thing. And it was hard, it was enjoyable, but there were some tough things, getting you up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Even in July, it gets pretty cold in Illinois. And but it was all part of the training. So that was it from boot camp. From there, I went back to high school and finished high school, and I wanted to ensure that I would be able to get a trade school when I entered the Navy. So what I did, just before I was graduating, I talked to the local Navy recruiter and to see what was available. And for some crazy reason, I wanted to run the boats, probably because my brother was a coxswain and a boatswain on attack transports, and he served on about I'd say 5 or 6 different ships during the 2 wars. And I just thought that that would be a really cool thing to do. Either a bosun's mate or a quartermaster that gets involved with the navigation. And the recruiter I spoke to, he says, why do you want to do that? I said, I think that would be a fun job to do. But he says, nah, you don't want to do that. He says, you want to get a rating that you can use after you get out of the service. Because most likely you're not going to continue. You're just going to be in for one hitch, and then you'll go back into civilian life. He says, look at me, I'm a chief torpedoman. I've been in for a little bit over 20 years. I'm going to be retiring soon. And it's going to be a hard time for a torpedoman to get a job out in civilian life. They don't use too many of us. So he convinced me not to go for those 2 ratings. And one of the things that they discovered during my physical was that I was colorblind. And that almost knocked me out of the Navy. They said there was 2 ratings that you could go for. And one was communications technician, which is a rating that deals with the coding, both coming in and going off the ships, and shipfitter. And I always enjoyed working with my hands, always building things. So I thought the shipfitter would be nice, but the communications technician sounded pretty cool too. So I signed up for communications technician. And next thing I know, the FBI is talking to my neighbors, because they do a security check, because it's a very critical job and they want to make sure they got the right people. And then he calls me, he said, you didn't pass the grade. And I said, why? And he says, well, your mother was born in Czechoslovakia, and it's a communist country. And because of that, you will not be able to go to that rating. So you're left with shipfitter. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was a natural lead-in to what I did when I got out of the Navy. And it was a natural lead-in to become an engineer, which I did after I got out. And so it worked out very well. And the icing on the cake was, after I got out of the Navy, I was working in Brooklyn Navy Yard as a welder. And I'm walking across the yard one day, and who do I see but this Navy recruiter? And he's coming toward me, I'm going toward him, and he didn't recognize me because I'm quite sure he had hundreds of guys that he recruited. And I went up to him, I said, hey, you're the guy that recruited me. And he kind of stepped back, maybe he thought I was going to slug him. But I said, you gave me some very good advice. And I related the story. I said, as soon as I got out, I was able to get a job in first Bethlehem Steel Shipyard as a pipe fitter, and then in Brooklyn Navy Yard as a welder. And both of those jobs were very, very good jobs. And he says, well, I'm happy for you. So I was a first-class welder in Brooklyn Navy Yard. And I said, what are you doing? He says, I'm an apprentice rigger. And so he couldn't even use his skills as a torpedoman within the Navy Yard. He had to start from scratch, and he was an apprentice rigger after more than 20 years in the Navy. And in a way, I felt bad, but I said, that just goes to prove what you told me before I signed up, that to go for a rating that's going to be useful after I get out. So that was very interesting. So whenever anybody says that they're going to go talk to a recruiter, I said, listen to them. They're going to try to help you. And, listen to their expertise. They've been doing it a long time. And it's just not to get you into their quota. They're there to try to protect your interests too.